Hi everyone, Magical Flower Nerd here. This is part 2 of my BTec course. This is basically all about my second year in my BTec course. I'd like to share with you bit by bit about what I was doing, how much fun I had, trips that I went on. I'd also like to share a little bit of a bonus. From the previous video of my first year of my lookbook, I've managed to find a video how to make my book and how it turned out. So let's take a look, shall we? When I was in Poland, I decided to do some sketches, and I decided to really take advantage of my photography skills and take leaflets and postcards so I could compose myself and remind myself like how I felt at the time. So I hope you enjoy the video of my final piece. As you can see, the book is almost like a postcard, and it flips open and reveals the story as my holiday went on. I spoke about my emotions, how I felt, I expressed the appearance, I expressed my senses and all the colours, and I really put this in my work along with all my sketchbook art. All the sketches went into my book. So I would edit them, or I would clean them up at least, and I'd put them in the book with Polish and English writing. This was one of my favourite projects. It wasn't my final piece, but it was one of the last ones that I did in graphics. I hope you liked it. Okay, so I've shown you my bonus video. Now to go on to year 2. This was my first and a few of my projects for fine art. We went to the Albert Dock Tate Museum where we learnt about Lottie and other industrial paintings. Here, this unit was based on printing. Now I did about my fish. I love like the free flowing, and I did etching, and here are some examples of how I've been etching. I used cold colours to represent water. I used wet paper and different surfaces to print on, and then I had the idea of having goldfish in glass bowls. Here, this is an example. This is actually my final piece. I've used different colours, I've used different shapes, I've used different surfaces, I've done different close-up angles. I love the outcome of this because there were so many opportunities and different ways to express my printing, and it was just my favourite. And I also used other inks, paints, dyes, and it was really fun. Now halfway through my year, I need to start thinking about what I'm going to do next. Am I going to go to university or stay for an extra year for foundation art? The Harris Museum is one of the best museums because it's local and I can learn from local artists near me for good methods, good ideas and good compositions for my next piece. This was my fine art class part 2. I went for gallery visits, and basically I wanted to do a botanical themed necklace. We had to make a sculpture or a form of jewellery for this piece, so I decided to use clay ceramics and plastic glue, PVA, and I wanted to make jewellery in different kinds of forms. So I tried rings, I tried to make brooches, and I decided on making like a not only botanical flowers, but how my composition would be. I also used wire to hold the things together. It was a bit heavy, but I also used paper as well with written messages inside. This was one of my favourite projects to do. This was an initial idea for a wall. I developed a photo. I've used circles like Martin O'Neill to present adventure bubbles, and it's a way to add more brightness and colour in a dark space. I have scanned in a handmade collage presented with a fish underwater theme, like they're swimming through a coral home, almost like an adventure swimming through a book, with the quote filling them up. I sent this for my client for feedback. I decided to experiment and Photoshop with different colours that would suit well in a dark place, with different coloured circles and different compositions of where the fish could go. I also created a fractal in the middle for the quote to stand out. I made this from pictures of coral patterns and scrap paper, and I made the fish swim around this so it becomes more obvious. I personally like this because the colours are great for children, it makes the place look lively, and I just think it's a really fun idea. I also used book pages as well into circles, so the bubbles look like words exploding all over the wall to encourage children to read more in the library and make it more of a fun and lively place to be. I was always remembering my theme and who my audience was, so I always kept it kid-like. My client was very happy with the pastel colours and the circles. I always remember what my client wanted and always put my artist input in. Always remember your theme and your colour palette and what's your idea for, what is the exact idea for. For a library, are you going to relate to books, and how can you put the element of adventure in? During my time in BTec, I went to many fabulous places such as Yorkshire Sculpture Park, the Great Northern Contemporary Craft Fair, the Tate at the Liverpool, and to Berlin. Berlin is definitely my favourite. We went to so many fantastic places, so many fantastic opportunities. For graphics, we started to look at about faded memory and places that meant special places to us, a bit like the Polish book idea. I still looked at typography and services, and I even tried new things like using carbon paper, spray paint, collage over acrylic, and I really enjoyed doing a typography idea. We learned about Carson. We also looked at how we could make letters from everyday objects. For example, I used a pair of headphones, I composed them in a certain way, and I managed to make a capital C out of them. Here, look for example. Then I looked on doing a Carson idea, and I used my L-Blong with capital E's, typewriter fonts, overlapping, and I did a course on typography, how to learn how to do a stem, baseline, link, bracket, terminal. Here's some examples of some typography that might be useful to you. You can use them in so many ways. You can do vintage, and here's an example of how to do this was my final outcome. I really like this as it's Japanese for autumn. It was for the calendar idea. For this brief, we had to do a piece based on visually impaired audience. So that means working on oily textures and making sure people can feel the art, not just physically but mentally. understand the purpose. So firstly we did a short course on paints with oil and acrylic and painting on top of surfaces and using surfaces to make textures on paper. I took pictures of flowers as that was my theme. I wanted to use nature, and I decided to go on Photoshop and paint flowers on top of eyes to almost like show that you don't need to see to understand art. So here are a few samples of how I got started. I started putting newspaper and book paper down and started using watercolour and acrylic to paint flowers all over. I was using Photoshop for composition, and then I decided to put a person underneath and then put flowers on top. I was using different surfaces and carbon paper. This was the start of my final outcome. I made the eyes really bold to emphasise the purpose. I put flowers and newspaper all over it, and I made the theme really known. I do believe that the piece is hanging in Royal Preston Hospital for the blind patients. We are now approaching the final part of the BTec art. It's a little bit scary, I'm not going to lie, but I decided to do mine on body image. I wanted to make almost a stand to how everyone is perfect the way they are. I've been through a journey of low self-esteem and mental health, and I wanted to show people that they weren't on their own. So I decided to look at Egon Sheila and Jenny Saville, who are artists who make abstract and disfigured skin and abstract drawing of people. So I started experimenting with fabrics. I used a heat press with templates. I started to use tie-dye, and then I decided to use photo paper and Photoshop and overlay face for disfiguration and an abstract look. Then I started to do sewing. I joined a sewing course for 3 weeks and learnt how to use a sewing machine. I started sewing into different materials such as plastic, glue, fabrics, silk, cotton, paper, and anything I can get my hands on really. I also started sewing words on about how I felt when I was in this place. This was a very personal and emotional project for me, and this was absolutely outstanding for me. The whole point of this tapestry was to make sure that it fits everyone, to understand that everyone is perfect and no one should be ashamed of themselves. I eventually got my sewing license. I started sewing straight away, and here's a close-up of some of the sewing techniques that I had. And I took a photography shoot with wearing the cape over me. This is a very emotional picture for me, as it kind of represents that I've been through the journey and I've survived, and that I've also used the sewing machine to do hands and faces to show the emotion and to show how powerful this project was. At the end of my course, I managed to achieve 3 distinctions, and honestly I had some really tough times, but I really enjoyed my course. And I have to say, anybody who is ready to do BTec, you will absolutely love it, and it'll be one. So that's my BTec course, both of my years, 2 years, and I absolutely loved every bit. Some of it was a challenge, and some of it I never thought I'd get through, but I did, and I can reassure you, my tutors were wonderful. I had so many amazing friends. I've come so far being in BTec, from being self-taught to being an absolute confident artist. I've learnt so many skills: how to sew, how to use a kiln, how to be a confident, hard listener, hard-working artist. I've learnt photography, graphics, and how to generally enjoy myself. And honestly, if you get the opportunity to do BTec art, do it. It is absolutely a fantastic opportunity. And if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask someone who has been through an amazing, sometimes a little bit hard, but absolutely amazing journey, just message me or comment below, and I'm more than happy to help you. You know what to do.